Beneath the blood moon's crimson gaze, silence bloomed like a wound in the heart of the howling night. Lyra Noctis stood bound at the court's frozen edge, her wrists raw against the iron chains that bit into her skin like the teeth of forgotten wolves. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine and frost, the mountain winds whipping through the ancient stone amphitheater carved into the cliffs of Eldridge Peak. Torches flickered along the tiered seats, their flames casting elongated shadows that danced like specters over the assembled pack. Alphas in fur-lined cloaks, their eyes gleaming with righteous fury, and betas whispering judgments that echoed off the ice-glazed walls. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the starless sky, melting on her exposed shoulders, each one a fleeting sting against the chill that had long since seeped into her bones. She was 19, an omega marked by the moon's indifferent touch, her dark hair matted with the grime of days spent in the undercroft. Lyra's violet eyes, once bright with the quiet dreams of a healer's path, now stared unblinking at the high seat where Alpha Thorn presided. His throne of antler and obsidian loomed like a jagged crown, and beside him sat Alara, his mate, her lips curled in a smile that held no warmth. The blood moon above pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, its red light bathing the scene in a veil of foreboding, turning the snow to rust beneath their feet. "You stand accused." "Lyra Noctis," Thorn's voice boomed, deep and resonant, carrying the weight of the pack's unyielding law. "Of consorting with shadows, of whispering secrets to the winds that weaken our borders. Your visions, those cursed glimpses you claim from the goddess, have sown discord, led our scouts into ambushes, and invited the rival packs to our gates. For these crimes against the moonbound covenant, the sentence is death by exposure. You will be cast into the whispering abyss where the cold claims all traitors." The words landed like blows, each one hollowing her further. Lyra's heart thudded against her ribs, a frantic drum in the cage of her chest, but she did not cry out. What crimes? Her mind raced through the fragments of memory, the dreams that came unbidden under the full moon. Visions of encroaching shadows and broken oaths, warnings she had shared in hushed tones with the elders. They had called her gift a blessing once, a thread of the goddess's favor woven into her omega blood. Now it was poison. Rejection burned hotter than the chains. She had been cast out not for deeds, but for the fear she inspired in those who clung to power. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, a tide of growls and sighs, the metallic tang of anticipation sharp in the air. Alara leaned forward, her golden eyes narrowing. "The goddess demands purity," she intoned, her voice silk over steel. "You are the stain we must cleanse. Let the blood moon witness your end." Lyra's breath came in shallow gasps, the cold air scraping her throat like shards of glass. She felt the pack's gaze as a physical weight, stripping her bare, not just of freedom, but of belonging. An Omega's place was to nurture, to yield, to mend the fractures of the wild. Yet here she stood, exiled in spirit long before the chains, her body a vessel for their scorn. The wind howled through the peaks, carrying distant weavos that mourned the pack's endless wars, a reminder of the betrayals that festered like open wounds in the lunar realms. As the guards stepped forward, their boots crunching the snow into crimson-tinged slush, Lyra lifted her chin. The blood moon seemed to swell, its light intensifying, painting her skin in strokes of fire and shadow. A tremor ran through her, not from fear alone, but from something deeper. A pull, ancient and insistent, like the tide answering the moon's call. She had always sensed it, this hidden vein of power beneath her quiet life, but never so vividly. The chains rattled as she strained against them, her pulse syncing with the moon's eerie pulse. The verdict fell final. To the abyss with her. Thorn rose, his silhouette towering against the fiery sky, and the crowd erupted in a chorus of approval, fists raised like claws to the heavens. But then the air thickened as if the night itself held its breath. The torches sputtered, flames bending low as an unnatural hush descended. No wind stirred the snow, no voices rose. The guards froze mid-step, their faces twisting in confusion. Lyra's ears rang with the sudden void. The Uivos silenced, the murmurs erased, the very crackle of fire snuffed out. It was as if the world had been wrapped in velvet, every sound stolen by an invisible hand. From the blood moon's heart, a figure materialized, not in thunder or blaze, but in absolute quiet. She was ethereal, cloaked in silver mist that shimmered like fresh fallen snow under starlight. Her form, both mother and judge, eyes like twin full moons holding the depth of forgotten eons. The moon goddess, descending not in wrath, but in a silence that commanded obedience. The court staggered, knees buckling under the divine pressure, alphas clutching their throats as if choked by the weight of unspoken truths. Thorn collapsed to one knee, his mouth opening in a silent scream, while Ilara's perfect composure shattered, her hands clawing at the empty air. Lyra alone remained standing, the chains loosening as warmth bloomed in her chest. A revelation, not of accusation, but of purpose. The goddess's gaze met hers, conveying no words, only the profound certainty that fate did not bend to mortal courts. Accusations were but echoes. The divine silenced them with truth. As the vision faded, sound trickled back in fragments, the gasp of the fallen, the whisper of wind reclaiming the night. The pack lay prostrate, humbled, but Lyra felt the shift within. Exile was not her end, but the forge of her becoming. The blood moon watched, its crimson light now a promise, as the guards, trembling, led her not to death, but into the unknown wilds beyond the peaks. The guards' boots crunched through the snow as they dragged Lyra from the amphitheater, the chains now slack against her wrists like forgotten promises. The blood moon hung low, its crimson glow bleeding into the horizon, casting the jagged peaks of Eldridge in hues of rust and shadow. No triumphant howls followed her. The pack's silence lingered, a divine scar etched into their collective memory. The goddess's intervention had spared her the abyss, but exile was its own sentence, banished to the frozen fringes where rogue winds carried the ghosts of old wars. Lyra stumbled forward, her bare feet numb against the ice-crusted path that wound down from the cliffs. The air bit deeper here, laced with the sharp tang of pine resin and distant thunder. Flakes of snow swirled in eddies, stinging her cheeks like accusations unspoken. She was alone now, truly, the guards having unbound her at the border stones and melted back into the night with fearful glances over their shoulders. "The goddess's mercy is not ours to question," one had muttered, his voice cracking like thin ice. But mercy felt like abandonment, a hollow echo in the vastness of the whispering wilds. Her breath fogged the air, each exhale a fragile plume vanishing into the gale. The visions that had condemned her stirred faintly in her mind, fragments of shadowed figures and broken oaths, whispers from the moon that the elders had twisted into treason. What gift was this, if it only brought isolation? Lyra wrapped her arms around herself, the thin shift of her prison garb offering no shield against the encroaching cold. The blood moon watched, unyielding, its light pooling in her violet eyes like spilled wine. She pressed on, driven by instinct alone, toward the labyrinth of ancient forests that bordered the rival territories. Survival was a thin thread now, woven from the same lunar silk that had once promised her a place among the pack. Hours blurred into a haze of wind-whipped branches and uneven ground, the path devolving into a trail of frozen mud and thorn-laced underbrush. Exhaustion clawed at her limbs, but fear kept her moving, the fear of stillness, of becoming just another forgotten bone beneath the snow. A distant howl pierced the night, not from her pack, but something wilder, laced with pain. Lyra froze, her heart stuttering. The sound echoed again, closer, a guttural cry that twisted through the trees like a blade. She veered off the faint trail, drawn by curiosity's cruel pull, her steps silent on the fresh powder. The forest thickened, silver birches standing sentinel under the moon's gaze, their bark etched with runes long faded. A metallic scent cut through the pine, blood, warm and coppery, mingling with the frost. Lyra's pulse quickened, a mix of dread and an inexplicable draw, as if the moon itself tugged at her veins. There, in a small clearing ringed by boulders glazed in ice, she found him. He lay slumped against a gnarled oak, his massive frame half buried in snow, broad shoulders heaving with labored breaths. An alpha, no ordinary wanderer, his fur cloak, embroidered with the ancient sigils of the northern crown, was torn and bloodied, revealing gashes that wept crimson onto the white ground. His hair, dark as raven wings, fell across a face carved from storm and sorrow, eyes closed in fitful unconsciousness. A sword, its hilt wrapped in weathered leather, lay discarded nearby, the blade notched from battle. But it was the mark on his chest, visible through the rent fabric, a jagged scar shaped like a crescent moon, pulsing faintly with an inner glow, that rooted Lyra in place. He was King Alaric Voss, she realized with a jolt, the exiled ruler of the Silverfang realm, whispered of in the pack's fireside tales. Marked by guilt for a war he could not win, a king who had lost his throne to betrayal and now roamed as a ghost, cursed by the very moon that crowned him. Stories painted him as a tyrant fallen, but the air around him hummed with something deeper, melancholy, etched into every line of his form, a duty unfulfilled that weighed heavier than any crown. Fear surged through her, instinctive and sharp. An Omega alone with a wounded Alpha? The wilds were no place for such folly. His kind devoured the weak without remorse. Yet curiosity bloomed alongside it, unbidden, as if the blood moon had woven their paths. She should flee, vanish into the shadows, like the traitor they called her. But his scent, earth and storm, laced with the faint spice of ancient oaths, stirred something primal in her blood, a recognition that defied reason. Her visions flickered at the edges of her mind, hazy images of a throne in flames and a hand extended in the dark. Lyra edged closer, her breath shallow, the snow muffling her approach. His eyes snapped open, golden and fierce, locking onto hers with the intensity of a predator roused. A low growl rumbled from his chest, but it broke into a cough, blood flecking his lips. "Stay back," he rasped, voice like gravel under thunder, pushing himself upright with a grimace. The scar on his chest flared brighter, a symbol of his curse, the moon's brand for a king who had chosen mercy over conquest, only to see his pack slaughtered in the aftermath. She halted, hands raised, heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. "I mean no harm," she whispered, the words tasting foreign in the charged air. Instinct screamed to run, but the pull was stronger, a thread of fate tightening. His gaze roamed her form, assessing, the gold in his eyes softening fractionally, not with lust, but with wary recognition. "An Omega," he murmured, more to himself, "adrift like me." Pain laced his tone, not just physical, but the weight of a soul fractured by loss. The wind howled through the clearing, scattering snow like ash from a dying fire. Lyra felt the chill seep deeper, but it was his presence that chilled her more. The raw power of him, tempered by shadows of guilt. She could leave him to the night, preserve her fragile solitude, or step into the unknown where fear and curiosity forged uneasy allies. The blood moon above pulsed once, as if urging her choice, its light glinting off the crescent scar that mirrored its own wounded glow. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The snow-laden branches creaked like weary bones as Lyra hesitated at the clearing's edge, the blood moon's crimson veil draping the world in uneasy truce. Alaric's golden eyes held hers, not with the savage hunger of legends, but with a fractured vigilance that mirrored her own unraveling trust. Pain etched his features, deepening the lines of a face that had once commanded realms, now humbled by the wild's indifferent bite. Blood seeped from his wounds, staining the snow in dark petals, and the crescent scar on his chest throbbed like a second heartbeat, its glow a faint echo of the moon's wounded light. "I am no threat to you," she said softly, her voice threading through the wind's low moan. But doubt coiled in her gut. Omegas did not approach kings, especially not ones cursed by the divine. Yet the pull persisted, an invisible tether drawing her forward, her bare feet sinking into the cold that numbed everything but the raw pulse in her veins. Alaric shifted, wincing as he gripped the oak's rough bark for support. "Threats find me regardless," he replied, his tone laced with bitter resignation, the words rough as frost-rimed stone. He scanned the tree line, nostrils flaring at some distant scent the wind carried, smoke and iron, the acrid mark of pursuit. "If you value your solitude, girl, vanish into the shadows. My ghosts are not yours to inherit." She should have obeyed. The wilds were vast, offering hollows and hidden streams where she could curl against the earth's chill and wait for dawn's meager mercy. But his scent enveloped her, storm-soaked earth and the faint metallic tang of spilled oaths, stirring a flicker in her chest, warm against the encroaching freeze. Visions teased at her mind's periphery, not clear prophecies, but impressions of firelit halls crumbling under betrayal. A crown shattered like ice. Was this the thread the goddess had silenced the court to weave? Lyra knelt slowly, keeping her movements deliberate, like approaching a wounded wolf. "Your wounds will claim you before the night ends. Let me bind them. The cold devours the careless." His gaze sharpened, assessing her as if she were a riddle etched in moonlight. For a moment, silence stretched taut between them, broken only by the distant crack of branches under unseen weight. Then, with a grunt that betrayed his exhaustion, he nodded once, the gesture heavy with unspoken surrender. "Do what you will, but know this. I am Alaric Voss, and my path ends in blood, not borrowed kindness." She tore strips from the hem of her shift, the fabric whispering against her skin like a reluctant confession. As she worked, pressing the makeshift bandages to the deepest gashes, slices from claws and blades that spoke of recent ambush, his breath hitched, hot and ragged against her temple. The touch was clinical at first, her healer's instincts overriding the tremor in her hands, but proximity ignited something primal. His skin burned beneath her fingers, feverish from the curse that bound him, the crescent scar pulsing in rhythm with her own quickening heart. Blood smeared her palms, warm and viscous, a stark contrast to the snow's icy kiss, and she felt its weight as a shared burden, the moon's red gaze bearing witness. "Why do you help a stranger?" he murmured, his voice softening as pain ebbed under her careful touch. Golden eyes searched hers, probing the violet depths for deceit. "Omegas of Eldridge are taught to flee the fallen." Lyra paused, the wind tugging at her hair like insistent fingers. "And kings are taught to rule without question," she countered, her words steady despite the ache blooming in her throat. Exile's sting lingered, fresh as the raw skin where chains had chafed. Yet here we are, both cast out. The goddess spared me from their blades. Perhaps she means for me to mend what they broke. It was half truth, half hope. Her visions had always been burdens, not blessings, but in this moment, tending his wounds felt like reclaiming a fragment of purpose. A low growl rumbled from the forest's throat, not his, but something larger. Pursuers, their howls fracturing the night like shattering glass. Alaric tensed, shoving her hand away as he snatched his sword, the blade singing free with a metallic keen. "Silverfang hunters," he hissed, rising unsteadily, his frame a tower of shadowed muscle against the birches. "They track me since the betrayal at Frosthold. If they find you with me, they'll paint you with the same guilt." Fear surged through Lyra, sharp as the cold that clawed her lungs, but she did not flee. Instead, she grabbed a fallen branch, its weight crude but grounding, her body coiling with untested resolve. The howls multiplied, circling closer, paws pounding the snow into rhythmic thunder. Shadows detached from the trees, 3 betas, their eyes gleaming feral under the blood moon, fur cloaks matted with travel's grime. They were no mere rogues. Sigils of the rival Ironclaw pack glinted on their pauldrons, twisted thorns that mocked the moon's grace. The first lunged, claws extended like scythes, aiming for Alaric's throat. He met it with a roar that shook the snow from the branches, his sword cleaving air and flesh in a blur of steel and crimson spray. Blood arced, splattering Lyra's cheek, warm and metallic, as she swung her branch at the second assailant, catching him across the jaw with a crack that echoed her pounding heart. Pain flared in her arm, but adrenaline surged, hot and defiant. The Omega who had knelt in chains now fought beside a king, their movements syncing in desperate harmony. Alaric dispatched the first with a thrust that ended in a gurgling silence, then pivoted to shield her as the third beta circled, lips peeled in a snarl. "Run!" he barked, but Lyra held her ground, her violet eyes fierce under the moon's glow. She dodged a swipe, the claws whistling past her ear, and drove her branch into the attacker's knee, eliciting a yelp that bought Alaric the opening to finish him. The last body slumped into the snow, steam rising from the wounds like spectral breath, the clearing now a tableau of red against white. Panting, they stood amid the carnage, the wind carrying away the iron reek of death. Alaric's gaze met hers again, not wary now, but laced with something raw, gratitude perhaps, or the first crack in his armored solitude. "You fight like one marked by the moon," he said, sheathing his sword with hands that trembled from exertion. Empathy flickered between them, fragile as the steam from their breaths, turning strangers' curiosity into a tentative bond. He was no longer just a wounded king. She saw the guilt in his slumped shoulders, the ethical weight of a ruler who had chosen peace over slaughter, only to lose everything. Lyra wiped blood from her face, the crescent scar on his chest catching the moon's light, mirroring the divine mark she felt awakening within. "We can't stay," she whispered, the night's chill seeping back in. "They'll send more." Together, they plunged deeper into the forest, toward a rumored cavern hollowed by ancient glaciers, a refuge where fire could be kindled against the dark. As they moved, side by side, the blood moon trailed them, its pulse a silent vow that exile forged not isolation, but alliance. But in the quiet spaces between their steps, doubt whispered, could a rejected Omega and a guilty king truly shield each other, or would their shared scars only invite deeper wounds? The wind howled its question, unanswered, as the trees closed around them like protective arms. The cavern's moss swallowed them whole, a yawning throat of ice and stone carved by forgotten glaciers under the blood moon's unblinking stare. Lyra's legs burned as she ducked beneath the low-hanging arch, the air inside thick with the mineral tang of damp earth and echoes of dripping water that mimicked distant heartbeats. Alaric followed close, his labored breaths ragged against the chill, the sword at his side scraping faintly against the uneven floor like a whispered warning. Snowflakes clung to their cloaks, melting into cold rivulets that traced paths down her neck, each drop a reminder of the wilds they had fled. The Ironclaw hunter's howls still ringing in her ears, fading but not forgotten. She fumbled for flint in the dimness, her fingers numb and slick with residual blood from the skirmish. A spark caught on the bundle of dry moss Alaric had gathered, and flame bloomed tentative, casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits across the walls. The fire's warmth was a fragile gift, pushing back the cavern's breath, but it could not thaw the knot of unease twisting in her chest. They had survived the night together, their alliance forged in the heat of battle, yet trust remained a thin veil, shredded by the doubts that clawed at her mind. What refuge was this, if it only delayed the inevitable? The blood moon filtered through a jagged fissure overhead, its crimson light pooling on the stone floor like spilled life, illuminating the crescent scar on Alaric's chest as he shrugged off his torn cloak. He settled against the wall with a suppressed groan, the firelight etching hollows in his face, turning his golden eyes to molten amber. "You've a healer's touch," he said, his voice low and resonant, carrying the weight of unspoken gratitude, "and a fighter's fire, rare in one so young." The words hung between them, not quite a question, but an invitation to bridge the silence that had shadowed their flight. Lyra knelt by the flames, feeding them twigs scavenged from the entrance, the heat licking her palms like a tentative lover. Her violet eyes met his briefly, then darted away, the intimacy of the space pressing too close. "Survival demands both," she replied, her tone measured, though her pulse betrayed her, quickening under the scrutiny of a king who saw too much. The visions that had haunted her since the court's judgment stirred faintly, hazy silhouettes at the edge of her awareness, but she pushed them down. They were curses, not companions, revelations that had cost her everything. Yet here, in this hollowed sanctum, with the wind's muffled howls seeping through the stone, she felt the moon's pull stronger, as if the goddess whispered through the cracks in the world. Alaric watched her, his gaze tracing the curve of her shoulder, not with possession, but with the quiet intensity of a man unraveling his isolation. Guilt shadowed his features, etched deeper by the fire's glow, the ethical torment of a ruler who had bartered peace for his pack's blood, only to inherit exile's crown. "The iron claws won't cease," he murmured, flexing his bandaged arm, the fabric she had torn from her shift now stiff with dried crimson. "They hunt the scar as much as the man. A mark of the goddess's disfavor, they say, proof I chose mercy over might at the Battle of Frostvale." His laugh was bitter, a sound like cracking ice. "Mercy. It left my throne in ashes and my kin to the wolves." The words struck her like the cavern's chill, stirring empathy she could not afford. Lyra's hands stilled on the fire, the flames reflecting in her eyes like twin blood moons. She had chosen mercy once, sharing her visions to avert disaster, only to be branded traitor. "Choice is the true curse," she said softly, the philosophy slipping from her lips unbidden, born of her own fractured path. "What is strength, if not the will to bear its cost?" The air thickened, charged with the scent of smoke and unspoken wounds, and for a moment the refuge felt less like shelter and more like a confessional, where vulnerabilities bled into the light. As the fire crackled higher, devouring the kindling with hungry snaps, a tremor ran through Lyra, not from cold, but from within. The blood moon swelled through the fissure, its light intensifying, bathing the cavern in a ruddy haze that made the shadows writhe. Her vision blurred at the edges, the world tilting as the hidden gift surged forth, unbidden and fierce. It was no mere dream this time, but a torrent. Images cascaded through her mind like a river breaking its banks. She saw Alaric enthroned in silver halls, his crown whole but fractured by thorns of betrayal. Ilara's face, twisted not in scorn, but in desperate alliance, whispering secrets to the Ironclaw Alpha. Then, deeper, a ritual under the full moon, where the crescent scar on his chest ignited, binding not curse, but redemption. And at its heart, her, Lyra, hands outstretched, violet light weaving from her palms, mending the shattered oaths, revealing the path to reclaim the northern crown. She was the pathfinder, the Omega whose visions were not poison, but the key to unravel the divine knot that bound him. Lyra gasped, her body arching as the revelation clawed free, tears freezing on her lashes. Words tumbled from her lips, fragmented and prophetic. The thorns, they come from within. Your mate's shadow feeds the hunters. But the scar, it calls for union, not exile. I see it, the flame that crowns the fallen. Her voice echoed off the walls, laced with the moon's timbre, and the fire flared unnaturally, embers swirling like stars caught in a gale. Alaric bolted upright, his golden eyes widening, the scar on his chest blazing in sync with her words, a searing glow that illuminated the cavern like dawn's first blood. He reached for her, not in fear, but in awe, his hand hovering near her cheek as if afraid to shatter the vision. You're the one, he breathed, realization dawning like a blade's edge. The guilt in his posture cracked, replaced by a profound certainty, the goddess's silence at the court, the pull that had drawn them together, all threads leading to this moment. She was no mere survivor. She was his destiny's revealer, the Omega whose light could absolve his choices, turning shame into sovereignty. But as the vision ebbed, leaving her drained and trembling, doubt flooded back. The gift had saved her from the abyss, yet it demanded everything, her solitude, her safety, her heart. To be his key meant stepping into the heart of the wars she had fled, choosing not just alliance, but entanglement with a king's shadowed fate. Alaric's gaze held hers, raw with possibility and peril, the blood moon's light glinting in his eyes like a question. Would she embrace the role that could redeem them both? Or let the revelation fade into the cavern's unforgiving dark? The fire popped, a solitary spark leaping free, and the wind outside howled its eternal challenge as empathy deepened into something irrevocable, a bond forged in lunar fire. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw the cavern's fire had dwindled to embers, their glow a fading pulse against the stone walls, mirroring the uncertainty that coiled in Lyra's veins like frostbite's insidious creep. The revelation lingered in the air, thick as the mineral dampness, its weight pressing on her chest as Alaric's golden eyes bore into hers, eyes now alight with a fervor that both terrified and tethered her. The crescent scar on his chest had dimmed to a subtle throb, but its echo resonated in her blood, a divine summons she could neither ignore nor fully embrace. She pulled back, her knees scraping the rough floor, the cold seeping through her threadbare shift like a judgment unspoken. What had she unleashed? The visions were no longer whispers. They were chains of their own, binding her to a king's fractured destiny. Alaric rose slowly, his silhouette towering in the crimson-tinted gloom, the blood moon's light slanting through the fissure like a blade of accusation. "The Pathfinder," he murmured, the title falling from his lips with reverent gravity, as if tasting its truth for the first time. His hand extended, not to claim, but to offer, a gesture laden with the melancholy of a man who had long walked in shadows. "You've seen it, then. The path that redeems, not just me, but the realms torn by war. Ilara's betrayal. It unravels everything I fought to protect." Guilt shadowed his voice, raw and unyielding, the ethical torment of a ruler who had spared lives only to doom his own. Lyra's heart hammered, a wild rhythm against the cavern's echoing silence. Freedom had been her fragile prize from the court's hush, the wild's vast emptiness, a canvas for rebirth. Yet here, in this hollow refuge, the gift demanded more. To weave her light into his scars, to confront the pack's venom and the rival's claws. Love? It flickered at the edges, not as soft surrender, but as a moral forge, redemption's proof, where compassion clashed with survival's edge. She shook her head, violet eyes flashing in the low light. "Seeing is not choosing," she whispered, her breath fogging the space between them. "Your crown calls for war, Alaric. Mine was stripped for less, What freedom do I trade for your ghosts?" Before he could answer, the cavern trembled, a low rumble that stirred the embers into sparks, the wind outside shifting from howl to thunderous roar. Dust sifted from the ceiling, and the scent of iron and pine invaded the space, sharp as drawn steel. Alaric tensed, sword in hand once more, his body a barrier between her and the entrance. "They've found us," he growled, the words laced with resignation, as if this confrontation had been inevitable since the moon's first scar. Figures emerged from the gloom, not the Ironclaw rabble, but ghosts from her past. Eldritch enforcers, their fur cloaks dusted with fresh snow, eyes gleaming with the court's lingering fury. At their head strode Thorn, alpha of her former pack, his antlered silhouette unmistakable, flanked by Alara, whose golden gaze now held a venom that twisted Lyra's gut. No longer the poised mate, she was revealed in the vision's cruel clarity. The traitor, her whispers fueling the border's breaches, her ambition a thorn in the northern crown's side. Betrayal hung in the air like the metallic tang of impending blood, the blood moon above swelling as if to drink it all. "Exile suits you poorly, little seer," Thorn boomed, his voice echoing off the ice-veined walls, boots crunching the gravel as his pack fanned out, claws extended. Torches flared in their grips, casting jagged shadows that clawed at the cavern's confines. "The goddess's silence was a mercy we question no more. But you've consorted with the fallen king. Our borders bleed because of it. Surrender him, and perhaps we'll forget your wandering feet." Lyra's blood ran cold, the wind whipping through the entrance like a vengeful spirit, carrying weavos that mourned the fractured oaths. Ilara stepped forward, her smile a blade's edge, lips parting to reveal the truth Lyra had glimpsed. "The visions were mine to twist, Omega. Your gift? A tool for the rightful order. Alaric's mercy weakened us all. My alliance with Ironclaw will forge strength from his ruin." The words landed like blows, exposing the web of politics and deceit that had ensnared them both. Thorn's ambition, Alara's hunger, the rival Alpha's shadow looming beyond. Alaric's growl filled the space, primal and protective, his scar igniting anew as he positioned himself before Lyra. "You've hunted me across the peaks, Thorn, but it's your mate who sells our blood for thrones." Steel clashed as he parried the first enforcer's lunge, the cavern erupting into chaos, fists and claws meeting flesh. The air thick with grunts and the wet rip of wounds. Blood sprayed warm arcs against the stone, mingling with the drip of melting ice. Lyra dodged a swipe, her body moving on instinct, grabbing a loose rock to smash against an attacker's knee. Pain bloomed in her side, a glancing claw drawing crimson from her ribs. But she fought, the moon's light fueling her resolve. This was no random skirmish. It was judgment's forge, where past sins collided with present choices. Alara circled, her eyes locking on Lyra's with predatory glee. Join us or die with him. Freedom? It's illusion for the weak. The offer hung, a moral precipice. Forgive the betrayals that had exiled her, align with power's cruel game, or stand with Alaric in war's embrace. Lyra's visions surged again, fragmented, flames engulfing the court, a union under the moon that healed the divides, but only through sacrifice. Compassion warred with liberty. To forgive meant chains anew. To fight meant blood on her hands. Her breath came in ragged bursts, the cavern's chill amplifying the heat of exertion, sweat and snow mingling on her skin. Alaric dispatched another foe, his sword a silver blur, but a gash opened on his arm, blood flowing freely. He glanced back, golden eyes pleading not for aid, but for her truth. Choose, Lyra, not for me, but for the light you carry. Thorn lunged then, a massive clash that sent them both sprawling, the Alpha's claws raking Alaric's shoulder. Ilara seized the moment, grabbing Lyra's arm, nails digging like thorns. The rival waits beyond. Deliver the king, and reclaim your place. The dilemma tore at her, visceral as the wound in her side. Pardon the past's architects and bow to war's hierarchy, or embrace love's redemptive fire, freedom be damned? The blood moon pulsed through the fissure, its crimson gaze a silent arbiter, illuminating the fallen bodies and the unyielding stares. Lyra wrenched free, her violet eyes hardening with the weight of revelation. "No," she breathed, the word of vow, as she swung at Alara, the rock connecting with a thud that echoed her breaking solitude. The traitor staggered, shock widening her eyes, and in that instant, Lyra chose. Not liberty's cold isolation, but the perilous path of compassion's war, where forgiveness might yet crown the guilty. The cavern rang with the clash's crescendo, enforcers pressing in, but the bond between them deepened, a spiritual tether against the encroaching dark. Yet as Thorn roared, rallying his pack for the final assault, doubt lingered like the blood's coppery scent. Could mercy prevail in a realm built on betrayal? Or would their choice only summon greater storms? The moon watched, unyielding, as the fire's last embers spat defiance into the fray. The cavern's chaos swirled like a tempest trapped in stone, the blood moon's crimson light fracturing through the fissure to paint the fray in strokes of fury and fate. Lyra's side throbbed with each breath, the claw's gash a hot reminder of her defiance, blood seeping warm against the chill that clawed her skin. Alara staggered back from her blow, golden eyes widening in betrayal's sting, but the traitor's snarl twisted into a laugh, sharp, venomous, echoing off the ice-veined walls like shattering crystal. Thorn's roar drowned it, a primal thunder as he barreled toward Alaric, their bodies colliding in a maelstrom of fur and steel. Claws raking flesh that yielded too easily under the king's waning strength. Lyra's world narrowed to the visceral pulse of survival, the coppery reek of blood mingling with the cavern's damp earth, the wet smack of fists against bone, the ragged symphony of gasps and growls that filled the space where silence had once reigned. She ducked the enforcer's swipe, her rock slick in her grip, and drove it into his temple with a force born of exile's rage. The Omega who had knelt in chains now rising, her violet eyes alight with the moon's unyielding fire. Pain lanced her arm, but it fueled her, each strike a rejection of the court's hollow judgments, a claim to the power the goddess had etched into her veins. Alaric fought like a storm unleashed, his sword a silver arc that felled one enforcer, then another, but Thorn's bulk pressed him back, the rival alpha's antlers casting jagged shadows that clawed at the walls. Blood streamed from Alaric's shoulder, staining the stone in dark rivulets, his crescent scar blazing brighter, a beacon of the curse that now begged for release. "End this farce, Thorn," he bellowed, voice cracking with exertion, golden eyes flashing toward Lyra amid the whirl. "Ilara's whispers doom us all, your pack, mine, the realms under the moon." The words hung, a moral thunderclap, but Thorn only laughed, deep and mocking, as he pinned Alaric against the wall with a brutal shove. "Mercy was your throne's ruin, Voss. Power demands blood, not visions from a witch Omega." Alara circled closer, her claws extended, gaze locked on Lyra with the hunger of one who saw her as both threat and prize. The air thickened, charged with the scent of sweat and iron, the blood moon swelling overhead as if to swallow the cavern whole. Lyra's vision surged unbidden, a final torrent, not fragments but wholeness, the scar's glow merging with her light. A union that could shatter the betrayals, heal the fractured oaths, but at the cost of everything. Sacrifice, her solitude, her unscarred heart woven into his redemption. Or flight into the wild's indifferent embrace, leaving him to the wolves. Her breath hitched, the dilemma a blade twisting in her core. Freedom whispered of endless snow-swept paths, unburdened by kings or curses. Yet the bond thrummed between them, instinctive, resisted, now inevitable. Alaric's eyes met hers across the fray, not commanding, but pleading with the raw vulnerability of a soul laid bare. "Choose us," the look implored, not for crowns, but for the mercy that crowns the fallen. Ilara lunged then, claws aimed for Lyra's throat, but she sidestepped, grabbing the traitor's wrist and twisting with a healer's precision-turned weapon. They grappled, bodies slamming against the stone, Ilara's breath hot and furious against her face. "You think you see truth? You're blind to power's price." Lyra's grip tightened, violet light flickering at her fingertips, the gift manifesting not as vision, but as force. A lunar warmth that seeped into Ilara's veins, forcing truths to spill like blood from a fresh wound. "I see yours," Lyra gasped, the words a prophecy forged in pain. "The rival's promise is ash, your ambition devours the light." Ilara recoiled, eyes glazing with the revelation's burn, her body slumping as the divine thread unraveled her deceit. Thorn faltered, witnessing his mate's fall. A moment's hesitation that Alaric seized, his sword plunging true, not to kill but to wound, pinning the Alpha to the ground with ethical precision. "Yield," Alaric commanded, voice steady despite the blood loss, "and let the moon judge, not blades." The enforcers paused, the cavern falling into a hush, broken only by dripping water and heaving breaths. Thorn snarled. But defeat shadowed his gaze, the weight of exposed betrayal crumbling his resolve. Ilara stirred weakly, whispering fragments of regret, ambition's hollow throne, the fear that had twisted her into the thorn. Lyra released her, stepping back, the light fading from her hands as exhaustion crashed in, her wounds a tapestry of fire and frost. Alaric rose, sheathing his blade, and extended a hand to Thorn, not in enmity, but in the mercy that had marked him. The Alpha took it, grudging, the pack's growls softening to murmurs as the blood moon's light shifted, crimson yielding to a softer silver as if the goddess approved. In that fragile truce, Lyra felt the Renascimento stir within, a rebirth not of isolation, but union. She crossed to Alaric, her fingers brushing his scar, the touch igniting a healing glow that knit his flesh, her light merging with his curse in a cascade of warmth. Pain ebbed, replaced by a profound peace, the bond sealing as their pulses synced under the moon's gaze. No words passed. The choice was etched in blood and fire, sacrifice yielding cura, their shared scars now a crown of redemption, where love proved not reward, but the forge of strength. Thorn and his pack withdrew, shadows retreating into the night, Ilara's whispers promising atonement's path, the political webs beginning to untangle under truth's blade. Yet as dawn's first pallor crept through the fissure, doubt's echo lingered in Lyra's heart. Union meant stepping into the realm's mending, war's remnants and oath's renewal. Her freedom traded for destiny's embrace. Alaric pulled her close, his warmth a shield against the chill, golden eyes holding hers with melancholic certainty. "We've chosen," he murmured, the wind outside sighing like a benediction. The blood moon faded, its promise fulfilled in their intertwined fates, but the wilds beyond called with new trials, redemption's flame ever burning, demanding more. The cavern emptied of strife, leaving only the scent of healed earth and lunar grace, as Lyra leaned into him, the Omega and the King reborn in each other's light. But in the quiet, a final vision whispered, the northern crown awaited, not in conquest, but compassion's quiet reign, their path a testament to faith over despair. The moon watched, silent and eternal, as they emerged into the snow-dusted dawn, hand in hand, the weight of choice a crown they bore together. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive. The dawn's pallor bled across the snowfields like a hesitant promise, silvering the jagged peaks that framed their emergence from the cavern's womb. Lyra's hand trembled in Alaric's grasp, the warmth of his skin a stark counterpoint to the frost that nipped at her healed wounds, each step crunching the fresh powder into reluctant submission. The blood moon had yielded to the rising light, its crimson echo lingering in the sky's bruised underbelly, a reminder that redemption's forge left scars even in victory. Ilara's confession hung between them unspoken, her broken form carried away by Thorn's retreating pack, a thread of atonement woven into the night's unraveling betrayals. Yet freedom felt fragile, a breath held against the wind's probing fingers, carrying scents of pine and distant smoke that whispered of realms still fractured. Alaric's golden eyes scanned the horizon, his crescent scar now a subdued glow beneath his mended cloak, pulsing in quiet harmony with her own awakening light. The union they had forged in the cavern's fire was no gentle bloom. It was a tether forged in blood and choice, pulling her toward the heart of the wars she had fled. "The Northern Crown calls," he said, his voice a low rumble like thunder retreating, laced with the melancholy of a king who knew crowns weighed heavier than mercy. "But not in conquest. Your Pathfinder's gift has shown the way, oaths renewed, pacts mended under the moon's true gaze." His thumb traced her knuckles, a touch both anchor and question, stirring the embers of something deeper than alliance, a love resisted in fear's grip, rationalized as duty, now accepted as the soul's quiet surrender. Lyra's violet eyes lifted to meet his, the wind tugging at her dark hair like the goddess's insistent whisper. The visions had clarified in the night's crucible, not as burdens, but as maps etched in lunar silver, revealing the ritual that would bind their scars into wholeness. Yet doubt coiled in her chest, cold as the snow seeping through her boots. Sacrifice loomed. To pour her light into his curse meant bearing her essence, risking the isolation that had defined her exile. The wilds stretched invitingly, paths vanishing into mist-shrouded veils where an omega could vanish, unclaimed and whole. "And if I choose the silence of the peaks," she murmured, her breath fogging the air between them, the words tasting of the liberty she had glimpsed in the court's hush. "Your redemption. Does it demand my erasure?" He halted, turning her to face him fully, the dawn's light catching the ancient gold in his gaze, turning it to molten resolve tempered by guilt's shadow. The ethical weight of his past pressed upon him, the battles where mercy had cost lives, the throne lost to whispers like Ilara's, now exposed as the rival Alpha's cunning snare. "No demand, Lyra, only truth." His free hand rose to cup her cheek, calloused fingers gentle against the chill-flushed skin, evoking the cavern's intimacy where empathy had first cracked his solitude. Love is no crown bestowed. It's the choice to stand in the storm, to heal what power breaks. I've walked exile's edge alone, bearing the blood of choices unpardoned. With you, it's rebirth, not reward. But the realms bleed, Thorn's pack, the iron claws, all entangled in deceit. Your light could silence the wars, weave the goddess's will from our shared wounds. Or we part, and I face the scar's fire without you. The wind howled through the passes, carrying faint weavos that mourned the old divides, snowflakes swirling like ash from a dying pyre. Lyra felt the pull visceral, the moon's symbols alive in her veins, the blood that had stained the cavern floor now a sacred ink scripting destiny's verse. Her gift stirred, not as torrent, but as steady flame, illuminating the precipice. Union meant stepping into the political fray, confronting the courts that had rejected her, forgiving not for peace alone, but to prove compassion's might over despair's chains. Sacrifice, her unscarred heart, offered to cure his curse, binding Omega and King in a realm where hierarchies dissolved under lunar grace. The alternative, freedom's solitary trail, tempted with its quiet erasure, but hollowed her now, the bond's warmth a proof against the cold. A tremor shook the ground, distant thunder rolling from the peaks, riders, their silhouettes cresting the ridge like shadows birthed from night. Iron claw banners fluttered in the gale, the rival Alpha at their helm, his form a hulking silhouette etched against the dawn, eyes burning with the ambition Alara had fed. He had come not for skirmish, but culmination, the betrayals converging in this snow-swept arena. Alaric tensed, drawing his sword with a metallic sigh, but Lyra stepped forward, her hand slipping free to extend toward the approaching storm. "No more blood for thrones," she declared, voice rising clear above the wind, the violet light blooming from her palms like moonlight on fresh snow. The riders halted, beasts snorting plumes of frost, the Alpha dismounting with a growl that vibrated the air. "The fallen king and his witch," he sneered, his voice gravel and spite, claws flexing as his pack fanned out, a wall of steel and fur under the fading crimson sky. "Alara's truths reach even here. Your mercy weakens us all. Yield the crown, Voss, or the peaks run red." Alaric's stance shifted protectively, but Lyra's light intensified, weaving through the snow like threads of silver fire, touching the Alpha's scarred brow. Visions cascaded not to her alone, but outward, a shared revelation. The war's roots in forgotten oaths, Alara's ambition a symptom of deeper rifts, mendable not by blade, but by the goddess's silenced judgment. The Alpha staggered, eyes glazing with the burn of truth, his pack murmuring as the light spread, illuminating paths to alliance over enmity. Pain lanced Lyra's core, the sacrifice exacting its toll, her essence dimming, strength ebbing into the weave. But Alaric's hand found hers again, his scar flaring in tandem, channeling the cure. Together, they poured redemption's flame, the crescent merging with her glow in a burst that silenced the howls, turning foes to witnesses under the moon's approving veil. The Alpha knelt, not in defeat but awe, oaths renewing on lips once curled in scorn. The riders dispersed, banners lowering, the political gales shifting toward unity's fragile dawn. Lyra sagged against Alaric, exhaustion a sweet ache, her light spent but soul alight, the union sealed, sacrifice yielding not loss, but wholeness. He caught her, lips brushing her temple in a kiss born of profound gratitude, the melancholic king reborn in her grace. "You've crowned us both," he whispered, the wind sighing benediction as they turned toward the waiting realms, hand in hand. The snowfields stretched endless, but no longer in isolation, their path a testament to love's redemptive proof, where rejection birthed renascimento, and the moon's symbols etched eternity in blood and fire. Faith had triumphed over despair, destiny embraced as chosen liberty, the Omega and King walking as one, their flame a beacon against the gathering light. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.